Now, asthma was just the first layer. Then came the anxiety. And when my father passed away, the panic attacks started, which made breathing, which was already a struggle, so difficult. And the worst thing was that I suffered in silence, right? Because I didn't feel understood.
Diana, thank you so much for joining us. As always, I don't like to share too much about people's stories because I find it's better when somebody else shares it directly from them than when I say it. So if you could just share a little bit about what it is you do and what is it that made you do what you do?
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation, Natasha, and hi everyone who's listening. Well, my story, like probably most of our stories, started in childhood, right? I was the youngest of 4 children. I wasn't planned and I wasn't wanted. And coming from a communist country where contraception wasn't really on the plate, among other things, and my brother and 2 sisters were already way older than me. I've come somehow into the world feeling unwanted. And of course, now I understand from the perspective of an adult that in a country where life was tough, where there was very little freedom, where there were already 3 children, that it's okay not to want the 4th one. But as a child, you can't really understand that logically, right? So what happens when a child feels unwanted, unimportant, not listened to? In the end, right, we end up feeling we're not good enough, feeling rejected. And of course, I tried to compensate for all of that. The way each and every one of us has their own way of coping with things like that, with things like rejection, and trying to compensate and earn our place here. And I was the sick child in the family, right? Because I got the attention when I was sick. You asked what I do. I'm an RTT clinical hypnotherapist and life coach. And Marisa Peer, the founder of the RTT method, the Rapid Transformational Method, speaks about 4 roles that we play when we do not have the emotional support and love as children. And I'm just going to briefly mention them so that it makes sense what I said about the sick child. One is the achiever, right? The person who, the straight-A student who ends up becoming an adult, working at the weekends, overworking themselves, trying to prove, getting validation from results, rarely being satisfied with any accomplishment. And then is the carer. The carer is usually like older brother or sister who ends up being like a mom for the rest. We also have the rebel, like the black sheep of the family, that causes problems a lot of times, that ends up, in the end being addicted to different stuff. And for me, all those roles had already been taken. So the last one that I could have taken was the sick child. So I've got asthma, right? Which made something as normal as breathing a struggle. As a kid, that can be very, very scary. And of course, we tend to have things from other roles too. At some point, the role we initially play might not be enough, like it wasn't for me. So I also ended up being the achiever in the end. Since my brother was already the achiever of the family, the first one in the family to ever go to university, that meant for me 2 universities, master's degree, PhD, right? So always trying to earn my place, to be seen, to feel valuable. And this is the story of almost every person I've ever worked with. Now, asthma was just the first layer. Then came the anxiety. And when my father passed away, the panic attacks started, which made breathing, which was already a struggle, so difficult. And the worst thing was that I suffered in silence, right? Because I didn't feel understood or listened to. I never spoke to anyone. I wouldn't have been able to explain what was happening anyway. And that made life very hard. In the end, I ended up being an RTT clinical hypnotherapist and life coach, which has greatly changed my life, obviously. But that was a long journey until then. A long journey of suffering in silence, of trying things. I started first with Theta healing, which was my first experience with meditation. And somehow I ended up finding Marisa Peer and worked on myself. And now I'm on this beautiful journey of guiding women through their journey of self-healing and rediscovery so that they can live life that they absolutely love, where they feel fulfilled and meaningful, where they enjoy amazing relationship, and yes, as you said, sexy confidence, and so much more. My story.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of the people that are on the channel are also struggling with that. I think a lot of people that are on a spiritual path have started that because of trauma in their life. And, it's like almost facing the dark night of the soul, where you either can look in or you can say, what do I need to change? Because I can always go back to being the same person that I was, and that's not going to get me anywhere. There must be something else. There must be something more. So, yeah, how did you find Marisa? Is it something that you were looking for answers, and then you came across it?
Yes, at least subconsciously I was, right? Because as you said, there's that feeling that something is missing, that there has to be something else out there.
Yeah.
That life can't be just a struggle to breathe, for example, or to prove yourself. How I found her, well, I started being more and more interested in personal development. So I have no idea how I ended up signing up for a free masterclass from Mind Valley, which is one of the biggest educational platforms. And Marisa's wasn't the first one. It was the second masterclass that I signed up for. But I loved it. At the moment, I couldn't have afforded a program with them, but I just signed up for every free masterclass that they had. One of them being with Marisa. And then I ended up, I said that was the intention. I want to do their programs. So I started with, I think, Bending Reality from Vishen Lakhiani. I bought his book. I dived into it. I started meditating a lot more. And things just started unpacking and unraveling in my life. And then I had a paid program with Marisa. At that time, I didn't know she was training people to do what she does. I thought she was just delivering programs. So I signed up I went to the second university of psychology. I started doing that. I took all the personal development programs I could think of. And also, when I found out that she trained RTT therapists, that I knew that was for me. It was a stretch back then. Of course, I had to pay in 24 installments, but I knew that was exactly what I wanted and what was missing. And that's what I did. And that's how I ended up being first a certified hypnotherapist and then a clinical hypnotherapist.
No, that's amazing. Yeah, I know a lot about her work. I'm also a coach, and I do a lot of work with. I used advanced conversational hypnotherapy, which is a little bit different because you don't use any scripts. You don't do any induction or anything like that. So, what are you finding with your clients at the moment? Who is most of the people that you're working with?
I think the most. I've worked with, obviously, a lot of people coming for anxiety and panic attacks initially. But what's very interesting is that no matter what I've worked on, be it depression, anxiety, procrastination, body weight, behind every issue clients came in with, there was always this huge fear of rejection and the feeling of not feeling good enough at the root cause. So they might have come in for weight shedding, for example, or procrastinating, or depression. But deep down, somehow the root wound and cause was basically the same, just the symptoms different from one person to the other. But there was this deep emotional wound of rejection and the feeling of not being good enough. And I think Marissa has actually called this not being good enough the disease of the century, which is probably quite accurate.
No, she's right. She's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so
yeah, this is the biggest thing. That's why I work a lot on sexy confidence. That's how I phrase it, because I do believe that confidence is sexy. It's the best outfit. And we all look amazing with confidence, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it feels amazing, right?
Yeah. No, you're not trying to hide yourself. You know, you just are. And you take away the judgment, what people think about what you look like or how you should speak. So, but now, when you do your course, do you need to do the work yourself? Do you practice on each other?
Are you still talking about RTT?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, definitely. The program itself, I think, is 1 year long. Now I graduated in 6 months because, I'm an achiever. So it was the pandemic also, so I had to keep myself very busy. And then, of course, there's always further trainings, upgrades. For example, between certified hypnotherapist and clinical hypnotherapist, I needed 480 hours, I think, of further training. So yes, of course, we do practice on ourselves. There are master classes. There are masterminds that we deliver as alumni. It's really amazing, and it's always interesting that you can never stop learning. You always upgrade. I can't imagine not doing another master class or a training or anything like that. So I think it's the basic. You want to be the best for your clients. Of course, I still keep working on myself.
Yeah. One of the biggest things I see with clients nowadays is that with the way that the world is, there's a lot of money shortage as far as it goes with work. People are struggling. The prices have gone up. Mm-hmm. And so something like coaching or life coaching is put on the back burner, because if I need to feed my children, that's more important than worrying about how I feel tomorrow. But you yourself know you've been through it. How different is it to have gone through what you did? And why would you say that to me? I think it's more important, but why would you say it's more important than even that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's easy to get ourselves distracted and lied to somehow by looking at the emergency in front of us, right? So laying the table for the household, which seems essential and an emergency and everything else. And it is, of course, yes, you need to put food on the table for the kids and everything. The problem, though, is that that's the physical world, which is always a reflection of the inner world, right? And since you're talking about scarcity, all kinds, whether it's shortage of workplaces, food, water, money, it's always an inner scarcity first. So I don't think it's random that I have this book I have recently finished, which is called The Having. The subtitle is The Secret Art of Feeling and Growing Rich. It's so far, by far for me, the best personal development book ever. Normally, I read one book in a book because the kid in me loves it, right? But for personal development books, I take longer, I underline, I do exercises, I make notes. This one didn't last 1 day and a half because it's so good and so easy. It's really easy to read. It's really easy to implement and to understand. So I would recommend people to look inside and find the inner scarcity somehow. Where do I feel like I'm not good enough? I don't have enough. There's not enough to go around. And where do all those beliefs and perceptions come from? Because, for example, in the pandemic, right, there were a lot of people who made a lot of money.
Yep.
And in any situation, even now with all the wars going on in the world, I don't think it's really a shortage of resources, of outer resources somehow. It's a shortage of our, I don't know, an inner feeling of plenty. When you work on that, the world outside changes. We say, I would say just, analyze a bit your emergencies, so to say. How many are fake? How many are just distractions keeping you busy? So that because you're too scared to look inside and start doing the inner work. I mentioned confidence several times. Think of if you just work on your confidence. How is your relationship with your children going to improve? How confident will you be to ask for a raise or for a promotion or start your job, start your own business? Right? So if you work on something that is basically emotional, everything changes. Your relationships improve. You won't settle for a lousy pay anymore or for working overtime all the time and so on. I hope that makes sense. So that's why I believe it's way more important to start doing the inner work, even though it can be scary. I'll give you that. Right? As I mentioned, I had to keep myself busy in the pandemic. I'm also an extrovert and an activist and a lot of stuff. So it's no wonder I kept myself busy 16 hours a week. I was teaching full-time, more than full-time actually. I also had my own tutoring sessions. I was doing the RTT training and the last year in psychology. It's a bit crazy, right? But it also, I don't regret it. I loved it. But part of me was under a lot of pressure to keep myself busy until I would, collapse at the end of the day, exhausted, so that I didn't have to stay with my thoughts, my fears, my insecurities.
Yeah. Yeah, I find a lot of people, when you are a person that's an empath or, is very attuned to the environment, you find that your sense of self-worth comes from doing things for others, they're achieving. And people that are not, that are these narcissistic people, they just think just their presence is enough. They just can be. They don't have to do anything. And then you don't want to be like that because then you think, well, I need to be contributing in some way. So it's this constant push and pull all the time. And eventually you got to just realize that it's just let it go. You're good enough who you are. You don't have to be doing anything. And it's almost like you say, it's like a coping mechanism just to get rid of the thoughts, keep yourself busy, because as soon as you allow yourself to start thinking, then it all comes up again. Yeah. So how is your asthma now? Do you still have it or is it shifted a bit?
It has, no, I worked on it a few years ago, almost 4 years, I think. It has greatly improved. I've only done one RTT session. I might have used a second one, honestly, but it has probably improved like 80%. And the reason why I say 80% is because last year I love being honest, right? So I haven't had an asthma attack for like 4 years or so, with the exception of last year in November when I ended up in hospital. It's true that it wasn't because of the asthma. There's something with my thyroid gland. My thyroid kind of gave me a heart rate of 154. Now, given the fact that normally it's between 60 and 90, 154, it was and I couldn't breathe because of the heart rate. So that's what triggered the asthma attack, but it wasn't an asthma attack initially. But other than that, I haven't had any issues. So it's greatly improved. Probably without that incident, I would have said it's 100% improved. keep in mind that when I was little, I would end up in hospital every 2 weeks.
Wow.
And
the panic attacks?
I was the kind of kid that would just ask for the injection. Like I would say the antihistamic or whatever they were by name, and I was only 3. So.
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of breathing is to do with taking in life, and I had it too, so I understand. I think I had my first asthma when I was about 5, but also throughout adulthood, and then it went away, and now it's been coming back here and there. So, but I find it's more a link to allergies than. That's why my nose is very blocked today for some reason. I don't know why. Yeah, I think it's pollen or whatever related as well. So your panic attacks, how is that? Has that changed?
I haven't had one ever since I worked on it. So everything has improved. Like I've used RTT to work on, as I said, anxiety, panic attacks, asthma. I worked on relationship. I even worked on my relationship with money. A lot of things.
Yeah.
A lot of things. Like my life is different.
Yeah.
My life is in a totally different place right now. I used it for fertility, which is the most recent.
Oh, awesome. So did you have a child, or are you planning on children?
I am 4 months and a half pregnant.
Oh wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I just find like a lot of people maybe don't have to go your route. You don't have to go and do the course and pay for 24 months over installments. You can actually just go to have the therapy and have someone do the work on you instead of having to do all of that stuff. Yeah. So, and I've watched some of her masterclasses. Yeah, so it's amazing. It really is amazing. So, how is your relationship with your family now? Has that changed as well?
It has greatly improved. Now I have to be honest, now being pregnant, it has brought to the surface a lot of stuff, right? It has reactivated a bit of not being understood, not being listened to, not belonging, things that have popped up throughout the sessions when I worked on myself, that I have solved a lot of. And somehow there's always another layer, right? So but of course now the way I understand it and I deal with it and I work on it is like, it doesn't have to take me 37 years like it did initially. I know how to look at it and, okay, this is interesting. Let's see what else is here. Because at the end of the day, I want to be an amazing woman for my boyfriend and an amazing mom and everything else. So yes, it has activated a lot of the inner conflicts, which I think is amazing because it means it's exactly what I need right now at this moment of my life. But yes, definitely, the relationship with my family has greatly improved. I do have very healthy boundaries. And I do say, okay, stop, which I wasn't able to do when I was small. To say like, this is really bothering me, I'm not allowing it. So yeah, if any of you have any issues like that, I would take Bob Proctor's advice before starting working on yourself, which is like, don't go as often and don't stay as long. If the situation is very tense. But yeah, it has greatly improved. I had to work on myself a lot for that, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you choose your parents, you're going to choose them to trigger the shortcomings you have in yourself. So it's just a mirror, right? And to me, your parents and your family, they're not there to grow up with you. They're there to grow you. And one hopes that they will wake up. Do you find that they are on the same path as you, though? Because I find a lot of people that I speak to, they don't have that. They're like the odd one in the family that no one really understands.
Yeah, I think we are at some point always the odd one in the family. That's why we try so hard to prove ourselves. Like, I remember I felt I was born in the wrong family, at the wrong time, in the wrong place, wrong era, wrong everything. I felt like, what am I doing? I know it sounds
Oh, I
really
get it.
exaggerated, especially for a kid. But honestly, I lived in my books. It's not a wonder that I mentioned fantasy books, right? The books saved me. They were my escape. I lived in my books. So I will always be grateful to my father for having started reading to me. Because I believe that even the PhD that I wrote, which is 300 something pages, or 200 something, it's still because of the love for reading that I got from him. Why would I want to escape in books, in adventures, other than the normal curiosity of children and playfulness and magic thinking? Because I really didn't fit in, or didn't feel like I was where I should be. Actually, it's very funny because in one of these, I have never said this anywhere before. In one of the scenes in RTT, as I was working as the client, I went to the scene of birth when I actually came to the world with the umbilical cord strangled around my neck. And the first thing that came to my mind was, what am I doing here? I don't want to be here. That's a tough thing for a kid to grow up with, right? Like, because I could feel before I even was born that I wasn't wanted. Even now, I do not like my hometown. Like, I try to stay as little as possible there. It doesn't feel like home, and that's okay. You don't have to start. Healing doesn't mean you start liking and loving everyone and everything. I want to make that clear. It means you start, being okay with who you are, loving yourself the way you are, feeling at home in your body, feeling good in your own skin, feeling good saying yes when you want to say yes, and feeling good when you say no when you want to say no. It's okay. If I don't think I would ever like that city, even if I'm born like 3 times more, and that's okay. Okay, that's okay. That's normal. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I think like some people we're born with a little bit more consciousness, more awareness, and something inside you says, "No, I don't belong here. This isn't right for me. It's not gelling." There's something, my parents used to laugh because whenever I used to go back to my hometown, as soon as I saw the board, I would start sneezing. Said, I'm that allergic, so I get it.
So think about what your sneezing trigger now.
Yeah.
Emotionally speaking, okay?
I'm working on this Buteyko breathing method, and it's actually congested my nose more instead of making it less. So I don't know if it's inflamed my sinuses or what's going on, but it's not normally this bad. So
it's the thing that comes to my mind is that this whole part of the sinuses is the connection between the fifth and sixth chakra, the one about expressing ourselves and communicating our needs and wants and saying yes and no when we want to say that. And also things that, maybe since the sixth chakra is about seeing, what am I not willing to see yet? What am I pretending not to see yet? I remember I was doing something from Christy Marie Sheldon from her program on Mind Valley. And when I asked myself, what am I avoiding? One of the things was breathing. Right? So, yeah, I would ask, like, what am I avoiding by this? Whatever that is. And of course, there were some layers behind it, right? Why am I afraid to take a normal breath or whatever it can be? Working on my business.
Well, I see it like I'm like you. I'll read a lot of books and I escape into books and I read a lot about the mind-body relationship. But even with that, I'm having trouble. I'm really struggling with this one. I just feel blocked, like literally blocked. And I don't know Like there's the two sides of it, right? Do you focus on the blockage or do you focus on what it is you want rather? Because like trying to sit in the blockage and release the blockage and understand the blockage may not necessarily make it go away.
Okay, so give me a sec here because I got all yawny and goosebumps. Whatever it is that you're facing in your life right now, and I'm not talking necessarily to you, Natasha, I'm talking to anyone listening at any point, is like, it's there for a reason. First of all, it means it's the perfect timing to solve something. It can be allergic reaction, stuffy nose, inability to breathe, acne, eczema, whatever, insomnia. I would ask, yes, you do work on the blocks, but it depends on how. I would just grab a journal next to me. I would go whenever it's safe, of course, for me to close your eyes. I would just go into a meditation and talk to this part of me that felt necessary for me to, to have this stuffy nose that doesn't let me breathe or rest or communicate or whatever. And ask, okay, like, where are you coming from? You would be surprised because you would see scenes, pictures, images, words, whatever it is. It's there for a reason. A lot of times, there's a fear behind it. Because if you think about when it started, it's not random.
Yeah.
Okay, there's something on your mind there. There might be some emotional charge. It doesn't matter what it is. Maybe it was a fight with someone. Maybe you're trying to get to the next level in business and that's scary. Whatever it can be. So what's the fear behind it? And behind any fear, there is a need. Right? So I'm afraid of being rejected. What's the need? The need is to belong, to be seen, to be understood, to feel important, to feel like what I have to say matters, and so on and so forth. Right? So how else can I fulfill that need of mine, myself, not waiting from the others, in a better way, in a healthier way, in a more successful way? Because if the need is to be seen, right, and I'm seen for something that I don't want, but I don't really know how else to do it, it's like, okay, let's see, where in my life am I not seeing myself? Maybe my accomplishment, maybe I'm shrinking, maybe I'm diminishing my accomplishments. I remember this is something very recent, actually. I had a discovery call with someone. They realized it was on money and the relationship with money. She realized that every time she was trying to communicate the prices, she felt the need to, reduce or not say or not charge. And I said, there must be somewhere else in your life where you're playing this. Where else are you shrinking? Oh, yeah, well, I always say I didn't do. Yes, that's perfectly true. But actually, you're also diminishing and shrinking God when you're saying I didn't do much. I mean, seriously, I don't think Jesus had a complex of walking on water for making people feel bad, right? It's like, I'm not going to walk on water because what if people will feel bad? No, of course not. But she had this thing like, I'm just a tiny drop in the ocean. No, there's the whole ocean in that drop. This is what you have to understand. So you have everything you need. Just think, what's the fear behind? What am I actually afraid of? Stay, in a meditative state, see what comes up. Trust that you will remember everything afterwards, to journal on it and see what's the need behind it and how else can you fulfill that need. If my need was to, as I said, to be seen or to belong or to feel important or to be accepted, because we hear so much talk about self-love and we forget that it starts with self-acceptance. So maybe I should look at, okay, what parts of me am I not accepting or not liking or I'm still rejecting? Start from there. How can I accept more of me today?
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, it's a very good exercise, and I agree with you. I think so many people, it's easy to speak it, but actually, you've got to go and do the work.
Mhm.
You can't just say, I always say to people, if you don't have time to meditate for 10 minutes, then you need to do it for an hour.
Mhm.
you know and the thing again with journaling is there's no judgment. It's you against yourself. There's nobody reading it, there's no expectation, there's none of that. So absolutely. I've been battling with this for quite a while, but yeah, I think uh, I don't know if it's a medical issue, or I had mold in my lungs about 6 years ago, and that caused my whole system to get out of balance. And then, of course, I went on one course of antibiotics after another, which completely destroyed my immune system. So I went completely off antibiotics, and now I also have been through a lot of emotional stuff. I'm moving house at the end of the month. I'm going overseas. So I'm immigrating. There's a lot of big stuff happening. So, yeah, I mean, it
So
could
it's
be
no
a
wonder,
bunch
right,
of
that
things.
it feels a bit suffocating when there's a lot of overwhelm around us.
Yeah, there's a lot going
Okay,
on.
yeah. Mm-hmm,
Yeah,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
yeah. So I get it. I know it's not permanent. It's not going to be forever. It is just what it is right now, today. And yes,
The
I will be
problem with
working on it
us,
for sure.
mm-hmm. The problem with us who are so passionate about helping others as therapists, coaches, and so on, light workers, everyone, whatever they are, is that we're finding hard to go and, ask for help for ourselves because we're so committed to helping everyone else.
Well, you know what happens, like for me, because I've done so much work, and I've read so much,
Mm-hmm.
learned so much, done so much. It's very difficult for me to communicate to the people around me because they don't know where I'm at. And so, like you have experience with your family, I have the same, where it's, just
Mm-hmm.
keep your distance, visit less, because the lack of knowing who I am and where I come from, it's quite big. It's more than what I realized. And I think maybe that's also got something to do with it, because I really want them to see what I see. I want them to grow the way I've grown, and they don't want to. It's very hard for me to sit back and just watch them stay stuck in that mindset and not have to say anything and not do anything. But it is what it is.
It's hard because we want everyone on board with us.
Yep.
And it's hard to accept, right? I'm guilty of this. Sometimes I feel the need, I'm so excited about something like, for example, this book, that I can't wait for my partner to start reading it.
Awesome.
Sometimes it's like, please, abandon the book that you're reading, read this. But actually, that's just like the kid in me, right? And yeah, I still do want him to start reading it and applying it. That's on the one hand, that's very selfish. On the other hand, it's also, somehow trespassing the free will of a person when I'm so persistent. And I catch myself doing that. Sometimes I stop and I'm staying with my, okay, why do I feel the need to? I mean, like, it's okay if I change, inevitably my positive change will impact him, right? So sometimes I have to do that introspection myself. I'm not perfect just because I've worked on myself so much. But I still have this tendency of trying to track people. I hope that makes sense. So I'm still doing it.
Absolutely.
I totally understand it. But sometimes you have to understand that everyone there have their own rhythm, their own level of consciousness, their own choices. We had to bump our head against the wall many times before we started something big. I mean, like, seriously, how many times have I been really down and really in desperate situations before I actually started RTT, for example, or anything else that was about personal development? Sometimes people need their own rhythm. Okay,
Yep.
but the problem is, I have to ask myself, why am I so attached to wanting him to do this, for example, or her or them? I did that with my students, right? A lot at the high school I used to teach at, especially with the students that were mine. Like I was the form tutor because I felt so much responsibility that it was overwhelming. And in the end, it didn't really help, right? Because the biggest regret was that they thought I didn't love them because I was a bit too strict, which was farther, it couldn't have been further from the truth. They were my light there. And we do that as children, as parents, as husbands, wives, a lot, right? We have an inner need to help people or help them evolve or whatever, or be the best, without realizing that not everyone has the same rhythm, the same objectives and goals and dreams and desires. So yeah, I get that, but see where it comes from. Why do we feel the need to have them on board at the same time with you?
Well, I think, as a child, if you've grown up saying, I need to become the caretaker, so that's who I am, and I need to make sure if they are safe, then I'll be safe. And then you carry that through the rest of your life, thinking, I need to make sure that people around me are safe so that I can be safe and that I can be heard. But I first need them to be happy so that they can hear me. The thing is, why do you need a middleman? Why can't you just be there for you? Why can't you just be happy for you? Why can't you just hear yourself? You don't need them. And I think the more enlightened you become, or the more wise you become, you start to realize that you're leaving people further and further behind. So less and less people will understand you, actually, because you've passed that ability to, communicate at that level because you're 10 steps ahead. You're not 2 steps ahead. And I think that would probably be why you'd want to give the book to your partner, because he needs to be with you as you grow. But it doesn't mean he wouldn't anyway. He might be learning exactly the same thing, but through a different way and his way.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that, because I actually, when I was married, I was listening to a lady who used to channel the plant kingdoms and the animal kingdoms. Every week I would read something, and she was talking about the history of humanity and so on. And that was just fascinating to me. But my husband then didn't want to know anything about that. That was just woo-woo. But he was reading a book on the Anunnaki and how, the tablets that were translated and all these things about the history of humanity at the same time. And a lot of the stuff that he was reading, I was reading as well through the channeling. Totally different sources. The one is like scientific fact. The other one was just talking to trees. So at the end of the day, it does come through. The message comes through anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And the people who are ready for it will receive it at the level they're ready for it. And yeah, absolutely. Exactly. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Speaking of what you were saying, I'm thinking back at Bob Proctor again. I said, he was talking about theology and science and how they treat spirit and whatever. And he said, at some point they will realize they're studying and talking about the same thing. And that's totally true, right?
Yes.
The book that I mentioned seems only about abundance and money, but actually you can apply it to spirituality and to everything else. That's why, for example, when I start a podcast episode or an RTT session or a coaching session, I always set the intention for me to, be present enough and listen to my intuition so that I guide the person in front of me to have the awarenesses, the healing, the upgrades, the results that they are ready for and are willing to receive.
Yes.
That's very important. Speaking of free will, and sometimes forgetting about it when it comes to the people we care most about, because we want them on board with us. And because where does that come from? There's that fear of losing people, actually. If I think back, why do I want him to keep up with me? Because I'm afraid I will, at some point, the distance is going to be too big.
Yeah.
If I'm honest with myself right now. That's it. And I won't like that distance.
Well,
and I have to make a choice, right?
Yes. But
So
it has
that's
to
it.
come
It's
from him.
like, that's the
Yeah.
fear. That's the fear. I've identified the fear now talking to you. And then what's the need behind it?
Yeah.
I don't want to be alone. I love him, right? I want him to be on a level that's close to mine. Speaking of awareness, and I also have a passion for philosophy and symbolism and a lot of other stuff. So sometimes that can be overwhelming for the people around me. Right? I'm too much sometimes.
So again, if you did get to a point where you're like this, he would face a crossroads where he'd have to say, either I need to grow with her or I'm going to grow apart. But either way, it's not a bad thing. I think it's when we get hooked on outcome. Because
Definitely,
it doesn't
yeah.
matter whichever. You know, if somebody truly loves you at a spiritual level, not at a physical level, it wouldn't matter even if they split, because you never really split anyway.
That's true, yeah. And anyway, all those moments between here and here, we both have the responsibility, of growing together. So it's not
Well,
like
absolutely.
people. I've worked with a couple and said, it's just like it happened overnight. I don't understand what happened. It's like, okay, it might feel it happened overnight. I can guarantee you, over the years, there were tiny things that you didn't speak about that kind of eroded and crippled the relationship. And now some things apparently made it all go ballistic. And I said, oh, yeah, so it's not overnight. So between here and here, whatever this means to you, there's a whole road, a whole journey that maybe you forgot to walk on together.
Yeah. Well, isn't that what it's about? It's about having the communication, checking in, being on the same page, saying, "Oh, is this where we want to go?" It's a conscious thing daily. It's not you don't just get together and say, "Right, we're together." And I think a lot of men are at fault with that. They go through this romancing stage, and then they say, "Okay, I've won it over. Now I can sit back and just become myself again, and watch TV and go watch sports with my friends." And what is she worrying about? We're married now, aren't we? Or we're in a relationship now, aren't we? And actually, it doesn't work like that. It's constant. You're working on yourself constantly. If you want to maintain a certain level of health, you've got to keep going, eating the right food. You can't just say, well, I'm here now, I'm going to just eat whatever I want to. Yeah. Okay, so where can people get hold of you?
Well, they can find me on Facebook, Diana Gatej. I also have my therapy page, Diana Andrea Gatej Therapy, but I actually rarely used it. So they can definitely find me on Facebook on my personal profile, exactly as they see my name here, or on YouTube with my Queendom podcast, which is a podcast for women, a personal development podcast with the flavor of women's circles. How cool is that? So that's it. That would be it.
Yeah, I'll post all those links below then. And then tell me, do you have a message for everybody? Or what would you like to say?
Yeah, the thing that came to my mind is still from Bob Proctor, whom I will always consider one of my biggest mentors, even though I don't really fully resonate with everything he said right now, because I've upgraded a lot. But one of the things that really impacted me was like, don't be a second in your own movie. Right? So I would say, have an honest look at your life, how happy you are in your life, and where have you given power to someone else or something else, so that instead of being the main character at the start of your movie, you're actually in a second role. And make the choice and the decision to get back on stage where you belong.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I think a lot of people do that because you've been conditioned, don't be selfish, share your lunch. Even as a child, if you get a new toy for your birthday, you get told, share it with your friend. You haven't even had a chance to play with it yet. And now you need to share it. And, there's all these conditions. And then what are you worrying about? Why are you crying? Get over yourself. You've never been allowed to actually sit and feel and be okay with that. And even if you were in a healthy relationship, a family dynamic, you're still going to have moments where somebody else has decided how you shouldn't feel.
Oh, that's one thing. And the other one is also, we're so busy with so many roles that we play, from being, I'm going to talk about women because most of the people that I work with are women, and it's easier for me. It doesn't mean it doesn't apply to men as well. You're a wife or a girlfriend or mother. You also have a job, so you're the person in your career, the business, and everything else. And at the end of the day, you forget you're a woman. Okay? When was the last time you looked at yourself as being a woman or a man and loving what you see and feeling amazing for being you? That's speaking of all the distractions and keeping ourselves busy, which is, again, putting ourselves second, if not last. So yeah, get back on the stage.
Absolutely. I actually heard it was a YouTube, I think, with Grant Cardone, and he was saying that one of the biggest mistakes his mother made was to take care of her kids first. She should have taken care of herself first. And that's what caused everything to fall apart, because when you put everyone else first and there's no one steering that bus, everything falls apart. I have the same. A lot of my clients, they put their work first or their children first. And I say, who is running the show? If they come first and you get sick or something happens, there's no one there for you. There's no backup plan.
Yeah, that's about being the carer, right? But something that people don't talk about when it comes to things like that is there's a lot of validation that people get from that, from being the martyr, for sacrificing themselves. But actually, what happens is that when you're being the martyr, you're sacrificing your happiness, whatever, for your children, so to say. It's like you're putting them in a very inferior position. You're taking their power away. You're taking your validation from, I'm an amazing mom. I've sacrificed my life for my husband, for the career, for whatever. Right? My mom said, I raised 4 kids and now I'm alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, does that make sense? So you get all that validation, but actually it's not helping the children, it's not helping the relationship, it's not helping their self-esteem and anything else, actually. So have an honest look at why you're doing the things you're doing, what's the validation that you get from it, and how else can you validate yourself in a way that is more balanced, healthier, and it's better for yourself and for the rest, of course. Because if you're okay, this is what we have to understand. If the mother is okay, the child will be amazing.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay with herself, I can feel it now. I had 2 lousy days because, yes, I do have days like that, especially since I mentioned that it kind of triggered a lot of stuff. Of course, I could feel it. Like, my baby in my womb could feel it. Today, I'm feeling great. The baby, too. Yeah. So, parents, whether you're a mom, dad, or just the caregiver and caretaker, so to say, please be honest, validate your needs in a different and healthier way, because the kids and everyone else around you will be amazing when you're amazing in your own skin and you're feeling good.
Yeah, no, you're right. When the baby feels everything the mother feels, when the baby's in the womb, even up until the age of 7, you can feel all your emotions, everything. People aren't aware of that. Yeah. So just as a last, sorry, I just want to go back a bit. If you become the sick one, is that because you were so young, you're only 3 years old, you couldn't possibly have done it as a form of manipulation, because there's no conscious thinking around that. Is it almost like a victim feeling, or is it a soul thing that comes in as a protective mechanism?
I don't believe it matters if you're the seeker or the carer or the achiever. What happens the first time you get a 10 or an A plus at school, right? Oh, great, you did amazing. So you associate that with validation and being loved. Just like the first time when you're sick and your mom hugs you, maybe she's not really available for hugging further. I mean, I don't know about you, but I didn't grow in a family where I love you was the word of the day, honestly.
No, me neither.
On the contrary, you shouldn't spoil the kid, and so on and so forth. The moment when that sick child gets, the parent gets scared, right? So you would kiss and check and apply you whatever lotions. We take that from love. We take it with love, and we don't give it up. And I didn't give it up even when, I became the achiever, the straight A student, which, by the way, wasn't enough. Like, did you get an A? For us, it was a 10. That would be the equivalent. Yes. Okay, did anyone else get a 10? Because it's not as valuable, of course, if you're not the only one.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And then if you got a B plus instead of an A, it's like, did anyone get an A? Why couldn't you? So it doesn't matter what it is. We take that attention as love. We hold it tight so that we don't lose it. And then we end up, overworking ourselves for validation. Even people who are, because I mentioned rebel, right? We'll say, like, how can that be love? Well, the parents are called to school. The kid gets attention. Even if it's so-called negative attention, it's better than nothing. They won't give it up. And the carer, of course, a lot of times will have to find someone as a partner that needs being taken care of, like an addict, like a high achiever who suffers from burnout and stress-related diseases and stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're going to be a magnet for that.
Or the sick one, obviously. Or a sick child.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just curious because, I mean, some people are still sick even when they're old. And you think, by now you should be able to work through that. But if you're close to it and you're not open to any kind of learning or growth, you're just going to, like I said, you're going to hit that dark night of the soul and go right back to doing the same thing you always did, but just push harder for it and just make people really see this is how bad it is. This is how bad it is, And it's just like, that's madness. Keep trying to do the same thing, expecting a different result. Yeah. And I don't know, I just feel like at some point when you are a rescuer or something, you're trying to help people like that, you've just got to just stop doing it and just send them love. And that's all you can do, because actually that's what they're looking for. It's not the attention, it's the love, right?
And see where all of that is coming from. That's also important. Like, there is some inner child healing work that needs to be done there, right? My sister still acts like the carer, and I'm like, she's 56 now, right? I'm the youngest. I still receive packages with chocolate and I don't know what kind of funny socks. And yes, because I still love them, because I am also a child deep down. But I mean, it's not necessary anymore.
No.
When she was in England, she sent, I received a package for the whole family that weighed 25 kilos.
Wow.
Now, I have to, I'm short, right? So right now, being pregnant in 4 months and a half, I'm 50 kilos. So can you believe that? I had to track that thing that she sent.
It's half your weight.
And half my weight, it was more than half my weight back then. And, things that we could have found and bought ourselves, but they weren't from her, right? So I can understand that. But carers rarely live for themselves.
Yeah.
They take the validation from being useful, from being, and then what happens is like, you've never lived for yourself.
Yeah. Because even if people appreciate it, it might not feel right for them. It might not be enough. It's always like, maybe I didn't give enough. Maybe I need to give more. Maybe that 1 kilo wasn't enough, so I'm going to give 25 kilograms because that's going to give it to me. Maybe it just then becomes a vicious cycle. Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, like, she was the oldest. My parents were at work. She had to take care of the rest. Right?
Yeah.
She would go do the grocery shopping when she was 3. How unfair is that for a kid?
Wow. Well, that's very young.
Yeah,
and as a child, you wouldn't know the difference. You wouldn't know that that's fair or not fair anyway.
But it's so familiar, right? So that's it. That's the problem. Why don't we change and we end up being 50 or 60 or 35 and still playing the same roles we used to play when we were 2 or 3 or 10? Because it's what's familiar, what's known, and the mind associates what's familiar with safety. That's why we don't give it up. The problem is that sometimes that familiar thing can be toxic relationship, abusive relationships, dysfunction, poverty, bad health, and so on and so forth. So you need to make something better familiar.
Yeah. And the thing is, if it's not familiar,
work.
And if you're not familiar, it's scary because I don't know what that is. I don't know how I'm going to handle it. I don't know what it looks like, what it feels like. It's foreign.
That's why people sabotage good relationships, for example, right? Because it's not familiar. Or job promotion or whatever.
Yep. Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, everything starts with you and it ends with you. And life's a journey. There's no end anyway. Like you say, there's always the next level anyway. And so we're just going to keep growing and learning. And I think you get to a point where you realize that everything is okay just the way that it is anyway, because you're not going anywhere. It actually then doesn't matter. Then you can let it go. And you can rather just play with it instead of getting obsessed with it and feeling hard done by life. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway. Well, thank you, Diana, so much for sharing. I really enjoyed our conversation. And wishing you awesome success with your baby. And being a mother is very rewarding. And you know what it also is? It's like you start to see what your mother went through because now you understand. Just gives you that deeper layer, which I think is amazing too.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, and you have an awesome day. Thanks again.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.